Senator Rono. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Mayorkas, nice to see you again. You've testified several times already this morning that you have, I'm going to quote you now, rigorous screening and vetting in place. Rigorous is your word for Afghan evacuees, refugees who have tens of thousands of them who have been brought to this country after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that this administration conducted, historically disastrous, I might add, in which 13 American service members were killed, including one from my home state, hundreds, maybe thousands of Americans left behind to the enemy, where they still remain. It's your testimony that rigorous screening and vetting has occurred. So I assume that you mean by that at least the standard refugee screening process is, if it's rigorous, it's at least the standard refugee screening process. Is that correct? Am I right about that?
Senator, I do think it deviates from the refugee screening, but we have taken steps to make sure that the program is indeed rigorous, and I use that term advisedly.
Yeah, I noted that you used it advisedly. It deviates, though, from the standard screening procedures. You're conducting in-person interviews of all of the refugees per the standard procedures. You testified that 100% of these people have been screened and vetted. So you're conducting in-person interviews per the standard procedures of all of these refugees?
Senator, our U.S. Customs and Border Protection personnel have physical contact and question each individual at the port of entry. If there is any question with respect to that individual, any derogatory information or any question that bears on the individual's safety, the safety of the American people, that individual can be placed in secondary.
Well, wait a minute. That's not my question. My question is, are you conducting the standard security procedure? Is the standard screening procedure for refugees is they are given an in-person interview to find out, for example, if they're a terrorist. So you said 100% of these evacuees are screened. Have they all been given in-person interviews per the normal process?
They have not all been given
Why not?
Interviews because we have to be mindful of the fact that we were in an emergency situation to evacuate U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, special immigrant visa holders, and others who. And
what percentage do those, the special immigrant visa holders and American citizens, what percentage of the total tens of thousands did those constitute?
I have that information for you. If you'll give me 1 minute.
The answer is it's an extremely small percentage. I mean, it's maybe a few thousand out of 60,000 who have come to this country. So my question is, why are you not conducting in-person interviews of the people who have been brought here to this country? Don't you think that's dangerous?
I do not, Senator. I think that if, in fact, there is information adduced that gives any cause for concern, number one, the individual is not brought to the United States.
Well, wait a minute. When you say that, I just want to be clear about this. When you say any information, you mean if they are already in our database as a terrorist or a criminal or a terrorist affiliate, right?
Senator, we capture the biometric and biographic information of the individuals in the transit countries.
Right, and if I understand that, and if they're in our databases already as a terrorist or a terrorist affiliate or a known criminal, then maybe you're saying there's a fault, then maybe they get an interview. But what about, so that's fine, but what about the thousands, tens of thousands of people who aren't already in our database? The people who we don't know who they are, have they been interviewed?
Senator, what we do is we capture their biographic and biometric information. We screen
That's like a fingerprint.
A fingerprint, a photograph, biographic information, and we run it against our databases in our law enforcement intelligence and other holdings.
But you're not interviewing them, Mr. Secretary. It's not unless they're already in our database that you then bother to interview them. Do you know how many of the 9/11 hijackers, the 20 who tried to enter this country, do you know how many of them were given an in-depth interview by a trained official?
If I may walk through the process.
No, this is an important question. Do you know how many of the hijackers were given an in-depth interview?
I do not.
One. The answer is one. That person did not enter the country. The others were not given an interview. We know the outcome. For that reason, the 9/11 Commission recommended in-person interviews for all refugees and others brought to this country in these circumstances. That was 20 years ago. That's why the standard procedure is an in-person interview for refugees or visa applicants. Now, you've testified that you're not doing those interviews.
Not at all.
That they're not happening.
No, if I may.
You have just testified. You just said that they are not being interviewed unless they're already in our system as a known terrorist.
No.
That would have captured none of the 9/11 hijackers.
If I may, Senator, that is not, and I apologize if I was not clear. You are correct that we are not conducting in-person full refugee interviews of 100% of the individuals.
What
that
percentage
brought
are you
here.
conducting?
I don't have that information.
What number have
What
been
we-
interviewed?
What we are doing.
Wait. What number of the more than 60,000 brought to the country? What number have received an in-person interview before they came to the country? Because you said 100% are screened. So what percentage have been given an actual interview by a trained official before they come to the country?
When you're speaking of a full refugee-like interview, I don't have that data. I will tell
Why
you
not?
that-
Are you not tracking it?
No, I don't have that data with me.
Why? I hear you. I understand what that means.
Yeah.
But why don't you? Are you not tracking it?
No, we have data in the Department of Homeland Security. You're asking me what data I have at my fingerprints?
Well, why don't you have it? You run the Department of Homeland Security. Why do you not know who has been interviewed or not before they're brought to this country? By the way, are you following what's happening to people who've been brought to this country? On September 19th, a female U.S. service member was assaulted by a group of male Afghan evacuees housed at Fort Bliss. September 5th, a report from your office, the DHS, from U.S. officials at intake centers in Wisconsin identified numerous incidents in which Afghan girls have been presented to authorities as the underage wives of much older men. Other reports of assaults and rapes by Afghan men for Afghan girls. These are some of the folks who have been brought here because they haven't been screened, because you haven't conducted interviews. Don't you think that's a problem?
Senator, those individuals have been screened, as I spoke of previously. And let me share
You interviewed them.
Let me share with you that if an individual violates a condition of parole, there are two things that can happen. They can be criminally prosecuted depending on the reason for their violation.
Mr. Secretary, my time's
they
expired.
can-
I've got to turn it over to other senators. I just want to say the fact that you are not conducting the most standard interviews for tens of thousands of people brought to this country is astounding to me. And it seems to me you've not learned the most basic lessons that we learned on 9/11 since then. And the security risk is unbelievable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to complete the response and to clarify,